Good morning, everyone. It's Wake Up Wednesday, and I'm back here in the woods with, I have a cat following me. There's chickens running around, mosquitoes on my head, but I come to my favorite tree. There it is. It's just awesome. It's a grand and glorious tree, branches sweeping down. You know, I was thinking about the alternate reading for this week, which is from the book of Samuel, 2 Samuel, chapter 18. It's a continuation of the story of David. And I would suggest, if you want to get a hold of David and understand who he was and how he operated, you need to have a very slow read of the book of Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel. Very slow read. And there you're going to find, wow, David was a little more complicated than you thought. Even Saul before him was rather complicated. You'll see that all these kings are kind of complicated. Their motivations behind what they do aren't always the purest. And what we have today is a continuation of the grief and pain that David is experiencing in his life because he really messed up earlier. Really messed up. What are we talking about? Remember, we talked last week about Nathan pointing out to David, you're the man who did wrong, when he told him a parable of a man who stole one little sheep from his neighbor to feed a visitor coming to his house when he had all these hundreds of sheep in his fold. David, you're the one who took someone's wife away from him. And you have all these women and all these concubines. And what are you doing, David? Okay, and it was told that trouble would never leave him. Trouble would follow him all his life. And it has. He's already had another son killed treacherously. And now we have the story of his son Absalom. Absalom was someone who had kind of left the family fold for a while, but came back and was penitent toward David. But then once again, he starts getting on his high horse, so to speak, and he leads a rebellion against his own dad. He does it in a very cynical way, too. You have to read the story. It's in 2 Samuel. And now David is fighting not only for his kingship, he's fighting for his very life, his own life. And he's mounted his forces and he's ready to make a sneak attack on Absalom and his forces, which are quite sizable. He has the backing of a lot of the people of Israel. David, he's kind of in hiding during all this, and he's got to make this sneak attack. Well, the attack happens. David stays behind under the advice of some of his leaders, and it ends up in a tree like this. What do we mean? Absalom is described as just a very handsome guy, long flowing hair, and as he's passing underneath one of these trees, his hair gets caught up in it. It was an oak tree. This is a maple. I don't have any oak trees around here, so this will have to make do. And as he's hanging there, someone goes back to David's commanding general, Joab, and says, hey, there he is. He's hanging in this tree, suspended between heaven and earth. And Joab says, well, did you kill him? And the person said, no, I didn't kill him. We all heard David say before we all went to battle, be gentle with my son Absalom. But Joab said, I don't need any of this nonsense, and goes and takes 3 spears and spears Absalom in the heart. And then his body armor people take out their swords and just chop him to bits. And then they throw his body in a pit and throw a bunch of stones on top of it. Well, word gets back to David, and to make a long story short, David is thrown into a period of grief, basically crying out, Absalom, Absalom. if it was only me that died and not you. Sad story, but it's one that was foretold by Nathan, that this trouble would follow David all of his life. Now the thing is, that's a sad story in and of itself, and it causes us grief. None of us as parents would like to lose one of our kids under any circumstances. But there's more to it than just that. You have to look and read the story slowly and carefully. Read what's in between the words, in between the lines of the story that's not written down, but it's there. It's there. It's David's grief. It's David's quest for power that put him in this position in the first place. It's David's abuse of the power that he was given. It's David's whole thing of being really in favor of God and saying, yay, Yahweh, and all that kind of stuff at one moment, and then the next, just kind of turning his back on what Yahweh has commanded us all to do and not living under the precepts of the law. Makes David out to be a very complicated individual, and it's a story that is worth looking at, because in a sense it doesn't matter where any of us stand in terms of the power we might yield, either politically or in any circles that we might be. Maybe it's the foreman of a job, or even just the power you wield as a parent. Hey, we can get messed up pretty quickly if all that goes to our heads, as very evidently it did with David. And he paid an awful price, a terrible price. It is a story of grief, but it's a story that was carried on through the ages, written down for you and for me to look at and say, aha, there's something to following the precepts and the laws of Yahweh. There's something good about it, something that can enable us to live lives of hope, live lives of joy and inner peace that can so quickly elude us when we decide to go down a different pathway. Well, I will always continue to come to this tree and enjoy its beauty, even though, it sort of does remind me of that awful incident with David's son Absalom. But for you and for me, let's look at it as the tree of life. Yeah, there's an image of that in Scripture too. And someday we'll talk about that. God's blessings be with you on this Wake Up Wednesday.